Got some business news for you now on the programme, starting with a new escalation in the ongoing trade war between the United States and China. Both sides imposing tariffs on each other's imports. Now, to talk us through all of that, France 24's Brian Quinn is on set with me. Brian.
Well, Nadia, Washington and Beijing are raising the stakes once again over the weekend with new tariffs and hikes on existing ones. More than a year into the trade war, the Trump administration is still seeking systemic changes to the Chinese economy, including an end to forced technology transfers and Chinese industrial subsidies. Erin Ogunke has the latest.
It's the start of a new battle in the US-China trade war. On Sunday, a fresh round of US tariffs on Chinese imports kicked in. The new 5% hike affects some $115 billion worth of consumer products, including clothing, shoes, and sporting goods. And Beijing retaliated with measures of its own, hitting $75 billion worth of American imports with tariffs of 5 to 10%, including a 5% tax on U.S. crude oil. Despite the escalation, President Donald Trump insisted negotiations with Beijing are still moving forward.
We'll see what happens. But we can't allow China to rip us off anymore as a country. We can't allow China to take $500 billion a year out of our country. We can't do that.
In the meantime, experts say American businesses and consumers will bear the brunt of the new tariffs, with some estimating they could cost U.S. households as much as $1,000 a year.
Retailers and their partners throughout the supply chain have to make some very painful decisions. These are taxes that are going to start to be collected. It's not monopoly money, it's real money. You have to pay the U.S. government. And it's not the Chinese, or it's not the Chinese companies that are paying these taxes. These are taxes that are paid by American companies, and it ultimately rolls up to the American consumer.
If Beijing and Washington fail to reach an agreement, the Trump administration is expected to impose another round of 15% tariffs in December, after which nearly all goods imported from China would be covered.
To Argentina next, where the government is struggling to control a deepening economic crisis. The country's central bank imposed currency controls Sunday in an effort to stave off capital flight as the value of the peso plunges. Exporters will now be required to repatriate foreign earnings. All companies will require authorization to sell pesos. Meanwhile, protests continued over the weekend as workers battered by austerity policies are now seeing their buying power hit by runaway inflation.
We want the minimum wage and worker benefits to be in line with the basic basket of goods. From that, we will see what the business sector and the government proposes.
Time for a check-in on the markets. Asian indexes mixed on Monday amid those new tariffs between the U.S. and China. Tokyo's Nikkei ending the day down 0.4%, an unexpected boost in Chinese factory activity for August, helping to lift the Shanghai Composite, which finished the day up 1.33%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng, though, down 0.6% with the unrest there. The Kospi in Seoul finishing just barely positive. Here in Europe, markets opening slightly higher. London's FTSE 100 up 0.33%. CAC 40 in Paris and the Frankfurt DAX each up just north of 0.1%. Finally, for business here in France, Monday marks the official rentrée scolaire, or back to school day. With a busy year ahead, plenty of students seek help from a good old-fashioned daily planner in paper. But the once indispensable accessory is struggling to compete with digital replacements. Karis Garland explains.
It's on the list for every back-to-school shopping trip, the diary. Quo Vadis is one of the market leaders, making 7.5 million diaries each year in its factory in western France. The company believes paper diaries won't die out in the digital era and insists on maintaining its Made in France label. It continues to invest. A new press machine like this one can cost up to 700,000 euros.
The digital diary has its place, but people still have a real attraction to paper. We need to invest to stay in the market, with the requirement we gave ourselves of producing in France.
Business isn't what it used to be. For the last 5 years, sales have dropped 2 to 3% each year from 50 million euros. Diaries made in France cost almost 3 times more than those made in other countries. To stay competitive, the company is relying on exports. 25% of its business is done in foreign countries, Germany, Italy and Japan importing the most. Another way of cutting costs, using automated machinery. Of the 210 employees on site, Véronique Renou is one of the 6 whose work is still entirely done by hand.
This kind of product can't be made with the machine. There are several pieces, lots of things to make. There are pouches on the inside that need to be sewn.
One of the French-made diaries will set you back 8 to 15 euros.
My agenda planning routine, Nadia, is usually just being late for things. So, is it paper or digital? Let's stay out of it.
I lost mine already this year, so maybe it's digital
Well done.
the way to go. Brian, thank you very much. Brian Quinn with The Business. Let's turn